The college football national champion of the 2024-2025 season is going to be...
Welcome to the college football playoff. The journey to greatness begins now. The top teams in the nation have battled it out all season, and now it's time to crown the champion. Who will rise to the top? Will it be the reigning champs or a new contender? The quest for glory starts now. Let's get ready for the college football playoff. So here's my college football playoff bracket.
In the first game of the college football playoff, the Boise State Broncos versus the Texas Longhorns. Let the madness begin.
In the history between these two programs, they have never played each other in bowl games or the regular season, and this would be the first ever matchup. Since the college football playoff was introduced for the 2014-2015 season, Boise State has never made an appearance yet in their history. Their best performance in that time since it was introduced was in the 2019 season, where they finished as the 19th ranked team in the college football playoff. The Texas Longhorns, on the other hand, have made one college football playoff appearance in the 2023 season. In their only playoff appearance, they played against the Washington Huskies. Unfortunately, they lost that game 37-31. Texas will be looking to win their first national championship since 2005. My pick to win this playoff game is the Texas Longhorns.
Now for the next game, the Oregon Ducks versus the Penn State Nittany Lions.
These two teams have faced each other 4 times in their history at the moment. In those previous 4 matchups, 2 of those meetings came in bowl games, with the first ever meeting between these two teams came in 1960. The last matchup between these two teams came in 1995. Where Penn State won that game by a score of 38-20. Since the college football playoff was introduced, Oregon has made only one appearance so far, and that was in the 2014 season, where they made it to the national championship game against Ohio State. At the moment, Oregon has never won a national championship. Penn State should be making their college football playoff debut this season. So far, their best performance in the college football playoff era was in the 2016 season, where they finished as the 5th ranked team in the college football playoff bracket. My pick to win this playoff game is Penn State.
The Ole Miss Rebels versus the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
These two teams have met each other twice in their history so far. In those 2 previous meetings between these two teams, both teams have won 1 game each. The last matchup between these two teams came in 1985, where Notre Dame won that game by a score of 37-14. The Ole Miss Rebels should be making their college football playoff debut this season. At the moment, their best ever performance in the playoff era was in the 2021 season, where we saw them finish as the 8th ranked team in the college football playoff bracket. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish have made 2 playoff appearances in their history, with their first one coming in 2018 and their most recent one coming in 2020. In those 2 playoff appearances, they have played a total of 2 games, losing both games and getting knocked out right away. So for this playoff game, my prediction is that Notre Dame will win.
The Alabama Crimson Tide versus the Utah Utes.
This matchup between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Utah Utes will be the 2nd ever meeting between these teams. The first and only meeting between these teams was back in the 2009 Sugar Bowl, where Utah won that game by a score of 31-17. Alabama is the most successful team in the college football playoff, having made 8 appearances so far in their history. At the moment, they have won 3 national championship games in the playoff era, and currently have a record of 9 wins and 5 losses. Their last playoff appearance came last season, where they played against Michigan. Unfortunately, they lost that game 27-20 in overtime. Utah should be making their college football playoff debut this season. So far, their best ever performance in the playoff era was in the 2022 season, where we saw them finish as the 8th ranked team in the college football playoff bracket. So my pick to win this playoff game is the Utah Utes.
My first quarterfinals matchup is the Texas Longhorns versus the Arizona Wildcats.
This matchup between the Texas Longhorns and the Arizona Wildcats would be the 2nd ever meeting between these teams. The only meeting between these teams was back in 1925, where Texas won that game by a score of 20-0. Texas will be looking for redemption in this playoff appearance after losing the previous playoff appearance against Washington. Arizona would be making their college football playoff debut this season. So far, their best ever performance in the college football playoff era was in the 2014 season, where they finished as the 10th ranked team in the college football playoff bracket. My prediction for this playoff game is I have the Texas Longhorns moving on to the semifinals.
The Penn State Nittany Lions versus the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Two arch rivals from the Big Ten facing each other in the college football playoff, and these two teams have faced each other 38 times at the moment. The last matchup between these two teams was in 2023, with Ohio State winning that game 20-12. And with these teams being conference rivals, they play each other once a year, with the next game coming in November of this year. Penn State hasn't beat Ohio State since 2016, and that win came at their home stadium, and this game would be a really tough battle for them. Ohio State is the third most successful team in the playoff era, having made 5 playoff appearances so far in their history. Overall, they have made 2 national championship games, winning one and losing the other, and their last playoff appearance came in the 2022 season. So my prediction for this playoff game is I have the Ohio State Buckeyes moving on to the semifinals.
The Notre Dame Fighting Irish versus the Florida State Seminoles.
This game between Notre Dame and Florida State will be the 12th ever meeting between these teams. In the history of this series, the first ever game was played in 1981, and the most recent one was in 2021, where Notre Dame won that game by a score of 41-38. At the moment, Notre Dame is on a 3-game winning streak against Florida State, which that streak got started in 2018. Florida State will be making their first playoff appearance since 2014, and this would be their second ever appearance in the tournament. In that first ever appearance in 2014, they lost that game to the Oregon Ducks, and in this appearance, they will be looking for their first ever playoff win. My prediction for this playoff game is I have Florida State moving on to the semifinals.
The Utah Utes versus the Georgia Bulldogs.
This matchup between the Utah Utes and the Georgia Bulldogs will be the first ever meeting between these teams. The Utah Utes have been a really great football team since 2014, having a winning record in each season since then. Also in that time, they have been ranked at the end of the season 7 times, with their best ranking being 8th in 2022. The Georgia Bulldogs are one of the most successful teams in the playoff era, winning 2 national championships in back-to-back seasons. They have made 3 playoff appearances so far in their history, with their last appearance coming in 2022. So, my prediction for this playoff game is I have the Georgia Bulldogs moving on to the semifinals.
In the first semifinals game, the Texas Longhorns versus Ohio State Buckeyes.
This matchup between the Texas Longhorns and the Ohio State Buckeyes would be the 4th ever meeting between these teams. In the previous 3 meetings, only one game was a bowl game, and the last bowl game was in 2009. The very first ever matchup between these two teams was in 2005, and the most recent meeting between these two teams came in 2009, where the Texas Longhorns won that game by a score of 24-21. In this series history between these two teams, Texas leads the all-time series against Ohio State 2-1. Texas will be looking to win their first national championship since 2005. Ohio State will be looking to win their first national championship since 2014. My prediction for this semifinals game is that the Ohio State Buckeyes will make their first national championship appearance since 2020.
In the final semifinals game, the Florida State Seminoles versus the Georgia Bulldogs.
This matchup between the Florida State Seminoles and the Georgia Bulldogs would be the 13th meeting between these teams. In the previous 12 matchups, the last 3 meetings have come in bowl games, with the last bowl game coming in 2023. The very first ever matchup between these two teams came in 1954, and the most recent meeting between these two teams came in 2023, where Georgia demolished them by winning by a score of 63-3. In this series history between these two teams, Georgia leads the all-time series against Florida State 7-4. This game will be a great one and will come down to the wire. So my prediction for this semifinals game is that the Georgia Bulldogs will make it back to the national championship game.
Now for the national championship game. My prediction is the Ohio State Buckeyes versus the Georgia Bulldogs.
With these two historic college football programs, this would be their third ever meeting between these two teams. The first ever matchup between these teams was back in 1993, and the most recent one was in the college football playoff in 2022. The last meeting between these two teams was in that playoff game in 2022, where Georgia won that game by a score of 42-41. Overall, in this series history between these two teams, Georgia leads the all-time series against Ohio State 2-0. So I believe that this game is going to be a fantastic national championship matchup. My prediction for the national championship is that the Ohio State Buckeyes will win their 9th national championship in team history.
So those are my predictions for the college football playoff. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments section. If you're new, please consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. And if you love sports, this is definitely the place for you. And also share this video with more sports fans. For more college football and football videos, please click up here. And thank you so much for watching. My name is Nathan, and I'll see you guys all next time. Just keep loving sports.